events coordinator at Books Are Magic, which if you don't know, is an independent bookstore a few blocks down on Smith. We're so excited to have you here at the Invisible Dog to celebrate Q&A with Adrian Tomine and Hua Shu.
Yeah, there's nothing.
Do we use microphone?
What is this for? Live stream. Oh, right. Okay.
Afterwards, Adrian will be signing and personalizing books at the table when you checked in. We'll also be selling books. We have Q&A, we have Shortcomings, we also have Stay True, which is on our bestseller shelf basically every week since it was first published. So you should buy every book there, because we do have a bookstore afterwards. I don't want to. They should be in your homes. If you're joining us virtually in the live stream, you can buy a copy of Q&A in the live stream description. So Q&A, the reason we are celebrating tonight is one part personal history, one part masterclass in craft and quality entertainment, with questions pulled from the time of the subject writer's residency and additional material.
No.
Q&A is a
you go first.
discussions with eagle-eyed fans and aspiring artists, writers, and cartoonists alike. Tomine looks back on his career in responses to queries from his public with a signature dry wit and unflinching self-deprecating honesty. Our star of the show tonight, Adrian Tomine, was born in Sacramento. His comics have been published by Toronto Quarterly, McSweeney's, Best American Comics, and Best American Non-Required Reading. He is a regular contributor to The New Yorker, with his graphic novel Shortcomings, which we have for you to purchase, and his memoir, The Loneliness of the Long-Distance Cartoonist, were named New York Times Notable Books of the Year. He lives in Brooklyn with his wife and daughters. A conversation extraordinaire. Hua Shu was a staff writer at The New Yorker and the author of Stay True, which we again have here for you to buy tonight. He teaches at Bard College and publishes Suspended in Time, a series of zines about music and life. Without any further delay, please join me in giving the warmest welcome to Adrian and Hua.
I don't have a book.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Oops. Hello. Hi. I'm supposed to do a quick reading, but I don't have a book, so we'll fill some time for a minute.
How's everyone doing?
Yeah.
Good?
Thank you for coming, everybody. Oh, that's okay. She's got it. Thank you.
Thank you to the people of the internet joining on the live stream as well. Hello.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Okay. I thought we were just going to do a conversation, but I'm going to do just to make it seem like a real reading, I'm going to read the introduction to this book. It's like 3 pages, so and we'll get to the conversation. Let's see. For almost 30 years now, I've had the unbelievable privilege of not only putting artwork out into the world, but also receiving feedback, mostly in the form of cards and letters, from a very engaged, thoughtful, and opinionated audience. I've spent most of those 30 years working alone, hunched over a desk in the corner of a bedroom. And while that admittedly sounds pretty grim and isolated, especially as I type this sentence, hunched over a desk in the corner of a bedroom, it's never felt that way. In fact, I often think of my career as a decades-long conversation between myself and an amorphous, mostly anonymous group of people who are for some reason drawn to my work. The correspondence I receive is generally a mix of generous praise and ruthless critiques, as well as many, many questions, often concerning tools, process, career advice, and an array of other surprisingly random and/or personal topics. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, and occasionally it's genuinely confounding. In any case, it still means a lot to me to know that someone is responding to something I made, and it's no exaggeration to say that this feedback has affected me and my work immensely. From 1995 to 2015, I published what I considered the most interesting of the incoming mail in each issue of my comic book series, Optic Nerve. But I also made an effort to respond to people directly, usually with a handwritten postcard. My responses weren't particularly eloquent, but I wanted to at least acknowledge the letter writer's interest and effort. For many years, my Sunday afternoons were devoted exclusively to this undertaking. But things have changed. It's been a while since I've published an issue of Optic Nerve, and I'm not sure when I might do so again. People are generally less inclined to write letters and postcards these days, and I've been stubbornly resistant to opening a direct line of email correspondence. Most significantly, I've gotten busier, both with work and family life. It turns out Sunday afternoons are different when you have kids. Then I said, there's a footnote that says to see the back cover. You can look at that. Photo taken by my daughter May right there. Let's see. In recent years, my P.O. box has become mostly a vessel for political campaign flyers, shipping supply catalogs, and books in search of a blurb. For better or worse, most of the comments and queries from readers now come to me via Instagram. And to tell the truth, I've not been able to keep up with my mandate to respond to everyone, certainly not with the level of detail and insight I once strived for. When my publisher and I began discussing this book, I thought of it as an opportunity to get back on track. The question and answer format initially developed as part of a writer-in-residence job that Substack offered me in 2021, and the interactive premise felt like a natural extension of those old Optic Nerve letters pages. My aim was to address the most common questions I've received over the years and to do so with a greater level of, don't even remember, of attention than I'm usually able to provide while quickly scrolling through the messages on my phone. But I also wanted to include some of the less common questions and basically to avoid the typical tone and scope of a professional journalistic interview, of which there are plenty to be found online. So we put out a call for questions. I answered them to the best of my ability, and the result, this book is the result. Okay, thanks to everyone who participated. Thanks to anyone who sent me cards, letters, or packages over the years. Contrary to the weird, uncomfortable affect I might present at a book signing, which you'll get to see in a minute, or really in any kind of face-to-face interaction, this connection in all its forms means the world to me. When I'm honest with myself, it was the reason I started all of this in the first place.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
So it's a real honor and pleasure to be in conversation with you. I've been reading you since those days of Optic Nerve.
Yeah.
And in the spirit of the book, I came up with a list of like 25 questions. I mean, the book is about advice, some of it banal, some of it kind of profound. So I have a list of banal and profound questions for you. Hopefully we can get through all of these.
Okay. Well, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
The first question is, do you still have all of the mail that you've received?
Oh, not
over the
all.
years?
No, not all. But I do have. Yeah, I'll reveal this. I have Itoya folders with all the letters that were either published or were too bizarre to publish. But and those are. I have boxes of those.
What would qualify as a bizarre letter?
Well, in Berkeley, it was more bizarre when I lived in Berkeley. I'll say that. There was some period where there was just like this perfect confluence of like people. The internet hadn't taken over, so people were still sending letters and stuff, and there were like some article, like the East Bay Express put me on the cover. So it was just enough that like that all overlapped, and I was getting packages, like for example, with like handmade books of Polaroids of places someone had seen me around Berkeley, and describing what I was doing at all those times. It was kind of felt like Lost Highway or something like that. But it was just I don't think I could quite describe, like when I talk about this stuff to anyone younger than me, they're like, no one sent you a box of like expired candy or something like that. But it was a lot of stuff like that, weird packages and very. I don't want to insult it by saying weird, because there were a lot of very personal letters, but it often was more personal than you might expect from that forum.
Besides the bizarre letters you would get, what was the most famous / random / unexpected person to send you mail at your P.O. box?
Boy. What was it? Famous,
random, or unexpected?
Okay. Well, there was a lot. Let's see.
Like, what's the volume of mail you were getting?
Oh, well, I mean, in Berkeley, it was a lot. Like, I would go to the P.O. box at least once a week, and there was, I had to get a yellow slip and go to the counter because there was more than that could fit in the little P.O. box. That's changed. Like I said, that's completely changed, and normally it's just one of those giant catalogs from Uline, like stuffing the thing that I have to pull out.
We used to be a country.
Yeah. Gosh, to answer your question, let's see. At the time, well, I guess I don't want to out anyone.
Sure.
But I will say that to me, at the time, to get any kind of mail from a published author or cartoonist, especially, felt totally unexpected, and to me, that was like getting a letter from a celebrity or something.
Cool. So, what was the first thing you remember drawing where you thought, I'm actually pretty good at drawing?
Probably much, I hate to say it, but probably much earlier than anyone else would have agreed with me. Like I have, I definitely tortured my mom by putting her on this. Like for some reason, as a kid, I thought I was going to draw like, well, I sort of did. I ended up drawing some like celebrity likenesses as an illustrator, but as a kid, that was like my main goal was to draw celebrities for some reason, and I would torture my poor.
Like what celebrities are we talking?
Like nerd stuff, like Harrison Ford as Han Solo, but then Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. Just Star Wars. And
so you were honing your craft by drawing Harrison Ford
or whoever. But I have a memory of torturing my poor mom by coming out and bringing out some horrible drawing and being like, "Does it look like him?" And she was like, "Who?" And I was like, "I knew you wouldn't understand," or something. Ripped up the drawing.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I think I probably had an inflated sense of my ability at an early age.
So one of the things in the book is people are constantly asking you for advice.
Yeah.
What's the worst piece of advice someone has ever given you?
Oh, first of all, I feel like this is like the first event about this book that I've done, and I just want to tell people that like I feel like the subtitle should be like, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Or but what do I know? I feel like that should really be.
Well, we're all here because we care about your opinion, right?
Well, but I really, it's a strange book for me because I have a personal dislike for like gurus or evangelists or anyone who claims to know the one way to do anything. So if you read through the book, you'll see there's a lot of things where I'll say like, this kind of worked for me, but maybe not for everyone, or don't necessarily follow this advice. The worst advice that I ever got?
Yeah.
Oh God, there was so much because I'm old enough to have grown up at a time when there was, or at least I lived in places where there wasn't any kind of interest or respect for illustration or cartooning or any of the kind of stuff that I really was interested in. Even up to college, when I started out trying to be an art major at Berkeley, and was quickly kind of laughed out of the department for turning in comic strips for assignments that weren't like Roy Lichtenstein ironic commentary on junk culture or whatever. So I mean, there was just, I think I mostly got bad advice, which was, don't waste your time with comics, and do fine art, be more conceptual.
Do Roy Lichtenstein stuff.
Or the class that I was in, Roy Lichtenstein was like junk by their standards, very lowbrow compared to what they were interested in. So, I didn't have a lot of, I'm envious now of young artists who can go to like a whole school for cartooning or be in a high school where there's teachers who grew up reading comics and will encourage you to do that or something like that. But for me, it was a lot of people trying to kind of steer me away from what I was really interested in, I think.
You mentioned Berkeley. What were your first impressions when you started college?
Yeah,
at Berkeley?
I think we overlapped a lot in Berkeley. I think we were there at the same time. And
right, I was not sending you Polaroids of places you were, but I definitely saw you around.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we were there at for a good handful of years. And when I read your book, I recognized every location in it. And I think I sent you a message where I said like, why didn't you just say that record store was Maud Lang on University? Because there were places that I recognized. So
there's a question about Maud Lang.
Oh, is there? Okay.
Yeah, but you grew up in Sacramento. So what was it like when you finally arrived in college?
Oh yeah, that was like my version of, moving to the big city. Like when I was in high school, I applied to to two schools for college, Berkeley and San Francisco State. Not because I thought I would get into Berkeley or because I particularly knew anything about San Francisco State, but I just wanted to get to the Bay Area. And strangely, I got into Berkeley, but not San Francisco State. But that was just my goal. Like I didn't know the difference between them or anything, but I just had this urge. No offense to Sacramento, but I just had this very strong desire to get. Well, I guess yes, offense to Sacramento, because I had a very strong desire to get out and to be somewhere else.
When you got to Berkeley, when you're starting college, what did you think you would do with your life? And you said that you had intended to major in art, but you ended up not doing that. What did you study?
Oh, I became an English major, but by the time I got to Berkeley, I had already decided that I wanted to be a cartoonist, like way before that. So I thought I could maybe integrate that into being an art major. And then when that didn't work out, I just was aware of the fact that I was actually kind of enjoying the English classes that I'd been taking, as opposed to the other ones. So I just sort of chose that as my major. But I didn't go to Berkeley with the goal of being an English major to become a novelist or anything like that. What was yours?
What was my major?
Your major, yeah.
I intended to be an English major, but much
But you
like
became
your
an art major.
experience in art, I had like a terrible experience where
Really?
people, yeah, and then I ended up majoring in political science because it was just insanely easy.
Yeah.
No
if anyone's ever
offense
said
to
that
political
before.
science, but it was just, the classes were so much easier than English.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
I don't know, it's not a controversial opinion.
Huh.
So, apologies to anyone who's unfamiliar with Berkeley, but what were your favorite spots to hang out at or
All right.
shop at in Berkeley? Were you partial to Amoeba or Rasputin's? And I
Amoeba.
believe, did you draw the bag for Maud Lang?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I designed artwork that Maud Lang was a very small independent.
Elitist record store.
Yeah, the kind that you're ashamed to bring your purchase up to the counter because
Yes.
the cashier is going to make fun of you or whatever. I don't know if they're still around.
They are.
They are, okay.
Yeah.
They moved.
Yeah.
They're somewhere else. But yeah, but between this is we'll zip through this for the people who aren't familiar with Berkeley, but
Yeah, what were
definitely
your spots?
definitely Amoeba and not Rasputin. It's funny because when I first moved to Berkeley, Telegraph Avenue seemed like this heaven to me. Like I remember moving into the dorms and just quickly throwing my stuff in the room and just running down to Telegraph Avenue and feeling like I'd finally gotten there. And now we go back to Berkeley for like 3 weeks and we never even go near Telegraph Avenue. But at that point, it was like, Amoeba, Cody's, Moe's, those are two bookstores. Cody's is now gone. Moe's is still there.
Yeah.
There was a comic store right there, just down the street from Amoeba, called Comics and Comics, which was the first place I went to after dropping my stuff off in the dorms. Yeah, and then I ended up living there for like 12 years, so it sort of expanded from there. I had a weekly routine for most of those 10 years with my two friends, Daniel Klaus and Richard Sala, two other cartoonists. And we would get together every Wednesday and have lunch and go to Comic Relief, which was the comic store down on, at the time it was on University, right next door to Maud Lang. And some of the used bookstores around the East Bay. So that was, I mean, if I meet someone like you who is from there, like we have a lot of these similar reference points, but if I meet someone else who just happened to go to Berkeley at some other time or, with very different interests, I think it seems like I had a very prescribed life there. Like I went to these 5 stores and ate at these 3 restaurants, and yeah. So there was definitely a lot of, especially when you think about the whole Bay Area, including San Francisco and the surrounding areas, that I did not explore, to be honest.
Now, you mentioned that you used to hang out with Richard Saul and Daniel Klaus a lot.
Yeah.
When you think back to that time, what do you remember most vividly? Or what do you miss about that time,
Well,
if anything?
yeah. First of all, Richard passed away a few years ago, so just as a friend, I miss him a lot. Yeah, I mean, I talk about it a little bit in the book, but I feel like it sounds like a little bit like I'm overstating, but I really do feel like those Wednesdays of hanging out with those guys was really like my version of going to art school. Like I kind of wanted to go to art school, but I ended up going to Berkeley, and coincidentally, because I was in Berkeley, I got to be friends with these two guys, and you know, they're a little older than me, and were definitely more established and experienced as artists. And so to have those kinds of friends, like it's one thing to have like a peer group, like you're all kind of struggling in the same way, but to have guys who are just like a level or two, or, you know, I should say more, I shouldn't say just level or two, but they were very established and very accomplished, and to have those guys as legitimate friends who kind of, for some reason, treat you like an equal and take you to these places, and, you know, that really was where I learned about so much in terms of not just cartooning and comics, but literature and art and film. And it was also just a real education for me those were the first like working cartoonists that I ever got to know. So to like just see what their lives were like, and just the minutia. Like I still do my taxes in the way that they told me how to do it. And you know, just all kinds of stuff like that. Just if you go browse at used bookshops with great artists or writers, and you just see what they're picking up off the shelf, or you act like, oh yeah, and then you're like, oh, I gotta go learn about what that is. And that's constantly what I was doing, because especially, like I said, it was a very pre-internet world. So like to go to these old bookstores, and they used to have these big cartooning sections, which you don't really see that much anymore, but you're looking at these collections of old New Yorker cartoonists, or old comic strips that were long out of print, or it was just stuff that no one had ever told me about, and I learned a lot from that.
That's really cool. Now, there's a part in your book about where someone asks you about kind of self-promotion, how to get noticed. Have you ever discovered, what are some things you've discovered based on someone sliding into your DMs or sending you something to your P.O. box? Are there bands or artists or things that you wouldn't have come across otherwise based on someone just sort of asserting themselves that way?
Oh yeah, I mean, definitely, yeah, all of that. I mean, it's not as common anymore, but that used to be the main way I would learn about new cartoonists. Would be, I'd get some, you know, folded zine, you know, like a Xerox zine in the mail, and if it stood out to me, I might mention it to one of those cartoonist friends, and they say, oh yeah, we got that too, and we would talk about it. I mean, that really was, for a long time, my main connection to a bigger world. I set up my first P.O. box in Sacramento when I was 16, and to me that was like this big gamble, because I signed on for like a 1-year subscription or lease or whatever, and I had to pay for it. But that was how I started meeting other cartoonists. Like I'd already corresponded with Dan and Richard by mail when I was living in Sacramento, so it kind of set up our friendship when I moved to Berkeley a little bit. But there's just, I mean, when I think back on it, I can make all kinds of connections about things that came through that P.O. box that led to other things in my life, including there was this is a little bit convoluted, but someone sent me a record out of the blue and said, I like your comics, here's my record, we're going to be playing, do you want to come see us in San Francisco sometime? That was a band called the Eiler Set, who you might have overlapped with. You probably remember them being around. And that was the drummer was this guy named Yoshi Nakamoto, and he was the one who wrote to me. And so I liked the record, and I went to the show, and we became friendly. And it's a long, convoluted story, but he ended up introducing me to my wife, who I've been married to for 17 years, and we have 2 kids together. So,
That's
a
amazing.
lot of credit to Yoshi, but that was the magic back then of this little PO box.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's funny because I saw you recently at an Eilers Set show.
Oh, yeah.
right, late last year.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of process questions. Do you listen to music while you work?
Only when I'm drawing. Not when I'm writing. I sit in eerie silence. How about you?
I always have to have music on.
When you're writing with singing?
Just even if I'm just like walking to the
Yeah.
bathroom.
Yeah.
I just need to always have sound.
But singing doesn't interfere with your composition of words?
No, I just view it as competition. No, I don't know. I just don't. I don't actually listen that deeply. I guess it's just ambient. But what do you listen to while you're drawing? Does it affect the quality of what you do?
I don't know.
Does it have to be something familiar, or can you listen to something new?
That's a good question. I'd like to say that I could listen to something new, but I think I'm more likely to get up out of my seat and either see what it is or change it or turn it off or something like that. So maybe something familiar is useful. I don't know. To be honest, I haven't been drawing that much lately. I've been writing a lot more than drawing. So I've been working in silence a lot more lately.
Now, you mentioned this in the book that when you do your comics, you actually do the images before thinking about text?
Not exactly. What I meant, maybe I didn't say it very clearly in the book, but it's that I think there's this school of thought about how to make comics that I was sort of indoctrinated into, which has its roots in like mainstream comics that are done by assembly line, and which is that some guy writes a script. It's almost like a movie script, and then some other guy takes that and turns it into a comics page, and then someone colors it or whatever. And even though I wasn't collaborating with anyone, I still kind of got sucked into that way of working, and I would sit at a computer and type out a script and then turn it into a comic. And then really from no one ever said anything to me directly, but just sort of like, again, being friends with these better, more experienced artists, you sort of just like, when you meet them at the cafe for coffee and they put down their notebook, you sort of see what they're doing for a second, or you go to their studio and you sort of see something that's in progress. So especially from people like Dan Clowes and Chris Ware, I saw that they were writing in the language of comics. So they weren't typing a script and then translating it. They were sitting there with a sketchbook or a notebook and really roughly making comics, like panels and scribbling in the words and doing kind of like stick figures. And so I sort of adopted that, and then as soon as I did that, I started having things, I don't know what it is, but maybe it's if you grow up reading comics that your mind is more activated by that language or something like that, rather than trying to take two separate things and combine them. But as soon as I started working in that way, I had that experience that, to be honest, I thought was kind of bullshit, where people say, like, these characters just came to life and they told me what to do. And I was like, no, they did not. But I swear to God that is really the experience I started having when I started writing in that way, where it's almost like I would accidentally draw a character in a certain pose or something, and then that would lead me to some line of dialogue or something. But I don't know if that, again, I don't know if that's just me, but like maybe you have to have a brain that was, warped by reading comics your whole life or something. But for me, that's really the way to get at ideas or material that I don't think my conscious brain would have come up with. And to be honest, there are certain times where like I have to really work on some big chunk of text, and I'll sit there and I'll work on it separately. But the first stage is always doing basically like a caveman version of what will become the graphic novel.
So now, because you're working on screenplays now,
Yeah.
right? How's your process changed? Do you still find yourself, at least mentally sketching things out, or can you just sort of go straight to the text?
Well, so right now I'm working on screenplays that haven't been produced, and I have also worked on one screenplay that was produced, and part of that experience taught me to not get your heart set too much on how things are supposed to look, or because I mean, with Shortcomings, I had like multiple layers of me envisioning how it should be, because I did the comic, and then I wrote the screenplay based on the comic, and so there was nothing about that script that I didn't have a vision of how it should look or how it should sound or anything like that. And not through any fault of anyone, but that experience will just teach, I think, anyone to kind of open up and give up on that level of control that you have when you're doing a comic yourself. Because also, as I soon realized, is that for 30 years when I was making these books on my own, that I wasn't just like writing and drawing it, but like in movie terms, I was the costume designer, I was the set decorator, like I was doing all these things that ended up, in a real movie are done by different departments of extremely talented people. So with the new things that I'm working on, I'm trying to not get so hung up on that, and to try and really build, I don't know, something that will then get transformed into something else, and to go in knowing that.
I feel like you sort of answered it, but what surprised you the most about the experience of Shortcomings, which, you wrote the screenplay and you were sort of around on set as Randall Park was directing it.
Yeah.
But
I
as you
think,
just
was that
noted,
the first time we met?
I think probably, other than
person.
me following you around. But,
He was doing a profile on the director, Randall Park, when they were filming in New York. So we met on a very late night in Manhattan.
That's right. Yeah.
When a lot of things were going wrong.
So what was it seems though the experience sort of pleasantly surprised you, the idea of kind of letting go of a lot of things.
Yeah.
Or like collaborating.
Yeah, I know. I often feel like if the 16-year-old version of me could have seen me on that set, he would have been so disgusted, because I was like hugging people and, looking at things that I thought were totally wrong and going like, oh, I love it, yeah, yeah, and just kind of lapping up not just the collaborative aspect, but the social aspect, which, I think I touch on this a little bit in the book, which is that like there is some downside to having your childhood dream come true, which is like, I just want to be a professional cartoonist, and I just want to be alone and work in my room, and that's all I want. And then 30 years later, you're like, what the hell did I do this for? So yeah, I was, and because of that, I think there was this part of me that was sort of, it was unspoken, but I was sort of praying like, I kind of hope this goes really bad so that I'll be like, yeah, I knew that was wrong. I knew collaboration was bullshit and socializing is awful, and I should just go back to my desk and draw more comics. And so I was very surprised that didn't happen. And everything about it surprised me, because even before it went into production, I spent a long time writing the script, and even that was really a new and surprisingly enjoyable experience. Yeah, and it's partially just because I'd been doing something else for so long, but I think there's some really practical, like concrete aspects of it that I noticed, which is that like being portable, like having work that's portable was a total change for me, and the idea that like, I could go on a family vacation and also get a little work done, which in the past wasn't the case because I had a drafting board and all these tools and all that stuff. And just, there's downsides to this, but the process of making a movie from the very beginning, even when you just have the first idea, to the very end is such a roller coaster. Like there's just so many insane hairpin turns and ups and downs. And that can be exhausting, but I found that it also finally gave me some interesting stuff to talk about at the dinner table each night. That, you know, I've mentioned this before, but I think back on all the years leading up to that, where like my wife would come home from work and I would say like, well, I inked a panel today, you know, and
I drew this great picture of Harrison Ford.
yeah. Does it look like him? And then, like then you've got 40 more minutes of dinner to get through. And, yeah, and so I found that just, you know, I would have so, like, even just stuff that, you know, it's not that important, but it's like, we might get this actor, and that actor said yes, or that actor said no, and all that stuff for me was really exciting, and I imagine for my family was probably a little more interesting than the, you know, I don't know.
It's like you were working in an office finally after
working
from home.
Yeah,
by
there was
yourself
like
for all
people I
these
hated, like, oh, can you believe what this person did? And
The key grip is terrible.
I mean, just there's just so little to say at the end of a day of making comics by yourself.
Let's turn it to the audience.
Oh,
I have like, we only made it through 14 of these, but
Wow.
But I'd love to bring the audience in. Try and project. I will repeat your question for the benefit of the live stream. So, if no one has any, I have
There's someone.
12 more questions. Yes, right.
Oh, yeah.
Could you shed a little insight into how you think of an iconic moment to illustrate, particularly for the New Yorker cover photos?
Okay.
Shed some insight on iconic moments like doing something for the New Yorker cover,
Yeah.
right?
Like how I come up with the ideas. That is one of the most frequently asked questions, and I don't have a great answer because it's a little bit mysterious to me, and I think that's important to like remain open to that. The idea that an idea could come from anywhere and that you don't have some formula for coming up with them. And I think you're specifically talking about New Yorker covers. I think for me, most of my New Yorker covers, I'm trying to tell a tiny bit of a story or a little bit of a joke or something like that. Me and a couple of my cartoonist friends are always envious of the artists who we talk about, like they just get to do a pretty picture, like it's just like, you know, fall is here or something like that, and we're just like, it's so appealing. I wish we could just do that. And so I think a lot of the covers have come from me thinking of something that's a story or an anecdote or an emotion or something like that. And then the real struggle is like trying to figure out how do I distill that into one image without breaking it up. My impulse is to do it in panels, you know, like I'm used to doing comics. I'm thinking, tell it like a story in comic book form. But I think I've done that like twice already on the New Yorker cover. And so I'm trying to break that habit of just thinking about telling stories that way. So a lot of times the hard work is trying to figure out how to take all that and put it into one image. And a lot of times it comes from something really small and personal, and then for the sake of the magazine, it's trying to sort of blow it up into something more universal. So like the last cover I did, it was called Eternal Youth, and it was two parents and their kid walking along the park, and the parents are wearing like Taylor Swift t-shirts and Olivia Rodrigo t-shirts, and the dad's riding one of those, I don't even know what they're called, it's like one wheel that you balance on, and he's vaping and all these things. And that came about when I bought these shoes, and I was like, am I too old to wear these? And like I was asking my kids, like, is this embarrassing if I come to your school wearing these shoes? And so the truth is, something like that, no one really cares, and it's not as big as I had it inflated in my mind, but that's where that image came from. So a lot of times it's something like that, which, yeah, and I think most of them are like that. I'll have some little experience, I'll observe something, I'll feel something, and then I think, what's a way that I can communicate that in one image? Thanks.
Yeah, up here in the front.
I apologize if you've answered this like a million times.
That's okay.
But you come across as this really genuine, just sweet guy. So I'm curious, in your short graphic stories that are very like dark and grim, and do you think dark and grim all the time?
All the time?
How do those stories manifest themselves?
So you appear to be a very chill person, but where's the darkness come from in your stories?
Exactly.
Well, let's see. Well, there's a lot of different answers. One is that I've changed as a person, that I'm not the same person who wrote the stories from 20, 30 years ago. Well, I just think that that's, but what you're describing isn't really necessarily a contradiction. I think that that's most humans, that they're, yeah, I don't think, I think maybe the dark stuff is maybe more my authentic self, and this is more like a, a pleasant performance that I put on. But as you get older, those lines start to blur, and I'm not exactly sure. It's almost like I've faked being an affable social guy long enough that now it's kind of become real. Yeah, but also with the writing, like the fiction writing, I don't want to give the impression that I just sit down and whatever I'm feeling flows out of me. It's not like that. A lot of times it's strategic, and a lot of times it'll be like I'm constructing a collection of stories, and these two are kind of lighthearted, so in the one in between I want it to be a little more serious or something like that. So that's also part of it. And then another thing is that when I started out, it's hard to describe, but it really was a different landscape in terms of how comics were thought of especially in North American culture. And so I think there was a lot of stuff that I was doing that was unfortunately in response to the pre-existing industry and how the culture thought of that. And so I was really kind of, if I go back and look at it, I kind of cringe, because I do think that there are some places where I'm really trying to be like, you think comics are superheroes? Well, look at this boring story. Or you grew up thinking comics were funny? Well, nope. I'm not gonna be funny at all. And so, like any kind of like things that are like rebellious, it's kind of cool and kind of commendable, but it's also still kind of giving power to the thing that you're reacting against. And so when I look back on some of that stuff, I do see myself trying really hard to be taken seriously, and kind of like being ashamed of things that are really cool about comics and the history of the art form and the medium. And so if you look at my work over the time, you'll see that it gets funnier, hopefully, and more cartoony and more colorful. Even like doing black and white was like this kind of pose to say, like, I'm not gonna do like those colorful comics, I'm not gonna give you that pleasure of color. Yeah, so I think as I got older, I started to open up more to the idea of like, oh, maybe thought balloons aren't inherently corny, or maybe it's okay to do things in the format of a daily strip and use that in some other way. So I think, I think a lot of that, I'm sure there are a lot of people just in general in their personalities, but other artists who have that this kind of stance as a teenager where like, I'm against that. And then they have to figure out what they're for, or they have to figure out who they are. And so I think that's been a very slow progression in my artwork.
Well, on that note, I think it really speaks to, I guess, your growth as a person, but also your growth as an artist, and how you've actually change the history of comics as well.
Oh, I don't know about that, but thank you.
So, thank you for this work. In fact, some of the questions that were asked were already sort of covered in the book as well. So, encourage everyone to check it out. And after you applaud Adrian, he will be signing at the table in the back.
Well, we'll both be signing.
So, yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you so
All right,
much.
thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Just last quick housekeeping. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to Adrian and Walk for celebrating us tonight. Yes, Adrian will be signing where you checked in. We have so many folks available for you to get for the sign. And if you go to the live stream, you can still do that in the link in the description. I know you all want to come and celebrate and congratulate Adrian right now, but if you could just hold off until you're in the signing line, so we can rush back there and get it started. We would really appreciate it. We're going to start packing up those shows.
Thank you to Books Are Magic, kid.
Thank you.